Well, let's think about that for a minute. Wisdom personified. The entire book of Proverbs, you keep coming back to wisdom and wisdom and wisdom, and even sometimes this personification is repeated and what have you. Well, the book of Proverbs says over and over again, a man that wine is a mocker and strong drink is raging. Whosoever deceived thereby is not wise. Over and over it's talking about don't give your neighbor to drink. I think that's Habakkuk actually, but over and over it's talking about how unwise it is. Don't give alcohol to a king. They're supposed to be of a sound mind and all this kind of stuff. Over and over. So it seems really strange then that wisdom would all of a sudden mingle her wine. Okay, I don't think that's what it is, and there's no reason to labor on this, but they mix drinks. Just like preparing food, they would prepare their drinks, okay? Now, wine in the Bible, there's no word that says juice in the Bible. Well, I think it's used one time in the Bible, but often in that day, the term, as far as the translation in English, the term was wine. The wine is just they squeezed the grape, or however they preserved it in a liquid form, but they kind of mixed it. So when somebody comes over to your house, you had to give them something. You didn't want to just give them water. Now, water's great, but you wanted to give them something. At our house, nowadays you just open up a can of Coke or Dr. Pepper or something like that and give it to them. What we'll do sometimes when we're hosting, we like hosting guests and what have you, and we'll put some what's that called, a Fresca? It's like kind of like Sprite, but anyway, I think. And we'll pour that over a whole bunch of fruit. Maybe mix a little something else with it. So the idea is just this mixed drink that she's prepared. She spent her time. She made it beautiful and nice and flavorful. Sometimes they put spices in it. I don't know if anybody here likes, what's that stuff we drink in the holidays? The spiced tea, yeah, or what's the apple cider? I guess I don't know. I like just about any of those things. If it's holiday, except for pumpkin spice, I'm over that. But any other holiday beverage, eggnog, non-alcoholic, of course, I like it. So here you got this. She's built her house. She's killed her beast. She's furnished her table. She's mingled her wine. And then she says there in verse 3, she has sent forth her maidens. She crieth upon the high places of the city. And so I picture these maidens, these ladies that are kind of like servants for her. I picture them just loving her, just wanting to spread the truths about, I'm testifying about how good she is. Again, we can go back to Martha Stewart and all these ladies and Joanne, and they've got their people that go out and spread the news, and they're sold out on this. And so when I read all this, the first thing, and this isn't really a big part of the message here, but the first thing I thought is this, and I think it applies, I think it's a good point to make, is that God, of course, is the ultimate example of wisdom, right? This is what we're talking about. We're talking about God's wisdom. He's the ultimate. And so I thought about this. He built a house. The Bible talks about the pillars of heaven. He built a house in heaven and in earth. Job 38:4 says, where wast thou when I laid the foundations of the earth? Declare if thou hast understanding. Who laid the foundations of the earth? Psalm 104, that it should not be removed forever. Job 9:6 says, which shaketh the earth out of her place, and the pillars thereof tremble. Job 26:11, the pillars of heaven tremble and are astonished at his reproof. Psalm 75:3, the earth and all the inhabitants thereof are dissolved. I bear up the pillars of it, Selah. So I see this thing, God, this is a good, example of God who laid, everything in this earth. All things were made by him, Jesus. Without him was not anything made that was made. And so he's made all of this. He supplies our food and our drink, right? Now we're talking spiritual, but he says, freely come. Whoever's thirsty, let them come and drink. Genesis 1:29 says he's provided our food. Now this is back to the physical here. God said, I have given you of every herb bearing seed which is upon the face of the earth, and every tree in which is the fruit of the tree yielding seed, to you it shall be for meat. Genesis 9:3, every moving thing that liveth, this is after the flood, shall be meat for you, even as the green herb have I given you all things. Psalm 23:5, thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. John 7:37, Jesus said, in the last day, the great day of the feast, Jesus stood and cried, saying, if any man thirst, let him come unto me and to drink. And then the last thing about this is that he's got servants that testify of his goodness, and they go out to, and so I kind of see a picture of God in that illustration there. But here's the thing that I want to mention tonight is that there are a lot in this world. There are a lot of people, organizations, businesses that are making you an offer. There are get-rich-quick schemes out there everywhere. In fact, when I first read this proverb, well, I've read it lots of times, but when I first read it in studying for tonight, I thought about this guy who I've seen these advertisements. They always pop up when you're trying to watch something, and this guy, I have to look up his name because I can't remember. It's Tai Lopez. Anybody know that name? Tai Lopez? Filthy rich, multimillionaire, and he's kind of got a charming personality. He doesn't come across as being real a know-it-all or anything like that. But here's what he does in his commercials. He takes you to his house, and he's like, yeah, see that? Yeah, that's one of my houses. Big pillars, big mansion, pool in the backyard. Let me show you my garage. See that Lamborghini? Yeah, I just bought that one. And he's just showing off his wealth, and he's showing off all of his stuff. And he's like, you could have this too. Anybody could have this. All you got to do. And then he goes into a spiel. $69.99 a month for my free. I mean, not free, but for my wisdom that you can learn how to have all this stuff and whatever. But I watched it, and I remember back to the days when I guess I didn't ever actually sell it. That wasn't my goal, but I was involved in the business. Shackley. Anybody ever know Shackley vitamins, Shackley cleaning supplies, and what have you? I still like the stuff. But I decided to go to a few of these meetings. And this guy, hey, I'm going to have you over to my house. And he wanted to put on this persona like he was somebody, like Shackley had made his life so wonderful. And he's got all these vitamins and these health products and stuff like that. But the guy was hard to look at because his eyes were so red and they were always dripping and he was always sneezing and he looked so unhealthy. And I thought, that's probably not a good example of, hey, you need to buy vitamins so you could be as healthy as I am. He didn't look super healthy. In fact, he died after not long after we left Oklahoma City. I'm not saying it has anything to do with Shackley products. I'm just saying that that wasn't a good example. And his house was a pretty nice house. But I'm saying the world wants you to see, like, look at my wealth. Athletes, movie stars. Well, don't you want what I've got? All you've got to do is, and then they give your little spiel. But not all offers that appear to be wise, the world's advice, do this, do that, not all are legitimate, and we must be aware. Let's compare this now to the foolish woman at the end of the chapter. I didn't write it down, so I have to find it. It starts in verse 13. Thank you. Verse 13. Let's read it for a minute. A foolish woman is clamorous. That means she's loud and just obnoxious, I guess. She's simple and knoweth nothing. For she sitteth at the door of her house on a seat in the high places of the city, to call passengers who go right on their ways. Whoso is simple, let them turn in hither. And as for him that wanteth understanding, she saith to him, here's her advice, stolen waters are sweet, and bread eaten in secret is pleasant. But he knoweth not that the dead are there. and that her guests are in the depths of hell. Now, to just the average person going by, young guy without understanding, not so knowledgeable. I mean, Proverbs is going to have a lot to say about wicked women, but I don't even think that's necessarily the implication here. It's just the opposite of that wise woman that it personified. Now it's personifying this just foolishness. All right, and in personifying it, it shows this lady who's sitting in the high places. You know, now wisdom was sitting in the highest place if you look up there and read that. But she's sitting in the high places. Apparently not in the house that she built and decorated and made look. She's just sitting there. I don't know. Who knows? She's renting it or she's just staying there. And she says, she says, stolen waters are sweet. You know, she's what she's saying is, here's what you need. You need to get other people's stuff. You need to let other people do the work for you. Doesn't that sound like our society today? I mean, this is the wisdom that you get. You just need to, you don't work harder. This Ty Lopez guy, I looked him up before I mentioned him tonight to see a little bit more about him. And that's his big thing. He's like, look, we go out there and say, hey, you're poor because you don't work hard enough. You have to work harder. And he's like, no, you don't. You just have to have these basic principles that I'm going to give you. Well, if you research him, he's made his multi-millions off of these fraud dating services. And somehow he gets in these people's bank account, and then they like trapped. This money keeps coming out of their account because they didn't read the fine line, and then they can't figure out it. And he's got tons of these online services and stuff, and he gets their money that way. And all these other kind of fraudulent type things. Yeah, there's a wise guy I want to follow. No, because here's the wisdom. Hey, we need this quick, get rich quick. You don't have to work for it. Let somebody else do it. Stolen waters are sweet. That's foolishness. But that's the foolishness that the world is going to give us. Now, obviously, this isn't all about making money. I'm just saying all the wisdom that we have in the Bible about being wise and doing right, knowing justice and equity and all those things that we talked about, that's all going to come with something that maybe doesn't necessarily look so easy. It doesn't look like what you really want to do. The lady up there, the loud lady that's sitting on the high places, she's trying to get your attention. Sometimes that's going to look more right. This entertain me, give me stuff. I don't want to have to work for it. Just give it to me. Give me somebody else's stuff. Steal from the rich and give to the poor, all these kinds of this philosophy that we have out here in the world today. But God's offer of wisdom doesn't always look easy, but it promises genuine results. But here's what you need to do, and I'm closing this down here. Verse 4. Look at verse 4 of our text. Whoso is simple. Okay, you want this wisdom? She's offering it to you. She says, come, I'll furnish my table. I've got the 7 pillars. Don't you want to be like this? Don't you want to be successful in God's eyes? Whoso is simple, let him turn in hither. As for him that wanteth understanding, she saith to him, come, eat of my bread and drink of the wine which I have mingled. Forsake the foolish, and live, and go in the way of understanding. He that reproveth a scorner getteth himself shame, and he that rebuketh the wicked getteth himself a blot. Reprove not a scorner, lest he hate thee. Rebuke a wise man, and he will love thee. Give instruction to a wise man, and he will be yet wiser. Teach a just man, and he will increase in learning. Look at verse 10. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the holy is understanding. Look, verse 4, she says, turn from your own ways. Verse 6, she says, forsake the foolishness. Verse 7 and 8 says, accept reproof and rebuke and instruction. Accept it. Take it. It's going to help you. Number 10, fear the Lord. That doesn't sound good. I don't want to fear anything. We can have wisdom. God has made it free to us. He's given it to us all throughout the Bible. We must just apply ourselves to it, but we must be willing to turn away from our own ways in order to have it. We must be willing to forsake our foolishness in order to have the wisdom of God. We must be willing to accept reproof, rebuke, and instruction. We must be willing to fear the Lord. Now, I'm not talking about salvation. Salvation is a free gift of God. There's a lot of foolish people out there that are saved, but they're still foolish. Okay? But we're talking about that higher ground. Being saved, but then saying, okay, now I want to follow the Lord and have a better life. You know, because I know a lot of people that got saved and they never grew. But God wants people that are going to follow him. And sometimes to follow him, we got to forsake all. Sometimes to follow him, we've got to accept some correction and some reproof and some rebuke every once in a while. We got to accept it. I love it, man. I like preaching that just rips my face off. Some people don't like that. They're like, no, I don't want to go somewhere where they yell or where they say that. I like it because why? Because it challenges me. You know, when lots of things challenge me. When somebody says like, well, you're never going to succeed at that or whatever, you know what I don't do? I don't go, oh, they said I'm going to fail. It just makes me want to prove them wrong. You know, I like to be challenged. I think I've mentioned this before, but I remember when I first went off to Bible college, it was during the vacation time. You know, you had a few weeks before the next semester or whatever. I'm done, so you can put the Bible away if you want, but... And this guy came to me, and he was hardcore. We were soul winning, and we were trying to serve the Lord, loving the Lord. But I had decided, since school was out, and they had a regulation, you couldn't have your sideburns down past your, I think maybe the middle of your ears. And I decided, since it's time, you know, hey, I'm not in Bible college right now, so I'm going to grow my sideburns out. I couldn't grow a very good beard anywhere else, but I grow sideburns, and so I grew them down to about here. Now, just for the record, I don't think there's a thing in the world wrong with that. If someone wears their sideburns long, I don't care. But I grew it long. I thought it looked good, and I showed up to church, and this guy said, what are you doing? I said, what do you mean? I'm growing my sideburns out. Do you know where that came from? It came from the hippies. It came from he was just going off on me. It came from the rebellious crowd and all this kind of stuff. Now, most of y'all, your first thought was just like what a lot of the people that said to me after I told them about what that guy said to me was, man, don't let somebody tell you what to do. It's your life. It's your hair. There's nothing wrong with having sideburns. And I agree, there's nothing wrong with having long sideburns. But I remember I just loved the Lord. And I loved rebuke. And you say, why would you like rebuke? Because it makes me better. And I thought, man, if he thinks that I'm being rebellious by having long sideburns, other people might think I'm being rebellious. I went home, shaved my sideburns, showed up to church the next day. Look, they're gone. Why? Because I just want to be better. And that's the key. If you want wisdom, if you want to succeed, if you want to be successful, not in man's eyes, but in God's eyes, you got to want to be better. You got to want to serve the Lord and fear him and know his ways. Let's go to the Lord in prayer. And Valerie,